Welcome back. In a significant change in U.S. policy, President Biden has now authorized Ukraine to use U.S.-supplied long-range weapons to strike inside Russia. Ukraine has been seeking this policy change for months, especially as Russian and North Korean troops are now amassing in preparation for a new offensive. In response, the Kremlin called Biden's decision a, quote, leap in tensions. This comes as Russia continues to attack Ukraine by air, launching a massive aerial bombardment just yesterday, targeting Ukraine's energy grid and killing more than a dozen people. Ukraine's Air Force says Russia launched 120 missiles and 90 drones in the attack. Joining me now is Mike Memoli, who's covering the president's trip in Rio de Janeiro. Now, of course, Mike, I'm a little jealous of your of where you are right now. But that being said, why is President Biden allowing this now with Ukraine, allowing them to use these missiles? And is this part of his strategy, you think, to give Ukraine as much support as possible before President-elect Trump takes office?
Well, Yamiche, for starters, it's not every day you can have Christ the Redeemer behind you in your live shot photo bomb here. I think we'll take advantage of that when we can. But certainly this is a major development on the part of an administration that really the pattern and practice for the 1,000 days of this war in Ukraine has been the Ukrainian government, President Zelensky, advocating for more resources, more firepower, more tactical advantages from the administration and from the West, and the Biden administration slow walking in some cases, eventually, though, usually getting there to provide that kind of assistance they needed. But these ATACMS that the Biden administration will now be allowing the Ukrainians to use to make potentially these kind of longer range strikes within Russian territory has been a particular journey for the president to get to yes on. But it does speak to the changing dynamics now as we're approaching the end of the Biden administration, the start of the Trump administration, as both sides are looking to try to gain as much advantage as they can before potential negotiations over an end to this conflict. The administration, for its part, though, as the Russians have been very strong in denouncing this move, calling it an escalation, has really churned the tables to say the real escalation came on the part of the Russians when they invited and welcomed the deployment of thousands of North Korean soldiers into Western Russia to prepare for a potential counteroffensive to the gains that we saw Ukraine make into Russian territory, into the Kursk region. And so that was something that the White House was very clear about weeks ago publicly, that they view it as a major escalation, and it took several weeks for that response to come, and that's what we're now seeing. It is interesting as well, Yamiche, to see the reaction on the part of Republicans in Washington to this move, because you have sort of the traditional, hawks on Capitol Hill, chairman of the Armed Services Committee welcoming this move, calling it a welcome development. But then you also have allies of the incoming president worrying about calling this a potential dangerous move to potentially ignite, as they're putting it, World War III for Donald Trump to have to inherit when he takes office in just over 2 months.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's happening, and while you're there in Rio, of course, is because President Biden's at his final leaders summit. And it's interesting because we know when President Biden came into office, he was telling America's allies that America's back. What kind of reaction is he getting now, and how much are these leaders reacting to President-elect coming back?
Well, it really is striking, Yamiche. I mean, you think about the summits we've covered since the beginning of this administration together, and the way in which President Biden wanted to assert the U.S. back on its front foot, to highlight the forum like these, to showcase alliances, as he was putting it 3.5 years ago, America is back. Well, allies at the time were asking skeptically, but for how long? And so it is a somewhat humbled President Biden who is at the G20 summit now after attending the APEC summit in Peru. And we're seeing kind of a symbolic moment. The president missing the family photo today that was taken of the G20 leaders. There were a lot of reasons for it, but it was sort of a fitting capstone to what is a retreat from here, the U.S. potentially on the world stage.
Yeah, definitely a capstone, and as you said, a humbled Biden. So thank you so much, Mike, for joining us from Rio. Now let me bring in retired Lieutenant General Steph Twitty. He is the former deputy commander of U.S. European Command and an NBC News military analyst. So thank you so much for being here. What do you make of this decision by the president to allow Ukraine to use U.S.-supplied long-range missiles inside Russia? And is it really maybe too little, too late?
Well, first of all, I welcome the move. For the past almost 3 years now, the Ukrainians have been fighting with their hands tied. They've had the limited ability to strike long-range targets inside Russia. And so, of course, I welcome. You cannot go into a fight with your hands tied. If you want them to win, you have to do everything possible and set them up for success to win. And I don't think it's a bit too late because, as you can see by the pictures that you're showing, every single day the Russians are firing long-range missiles and drones at the Ukrainians. This move here allows the Ukrainians to attack back, to attack deep inside Russia, to go after these launch sites that these missiles are coming from, to go after the drone sites, to go after the ammunition depots, to go after command and control centers. And so this will help, particularly as the Ukrainians go into the winter, lacking electricity, and what little electricity that they have now. Hopefully we could salvage some of that by allowing them to use long-range strikes 200 miles into Russia.
And as you talk about this, part of what the Biden administration is saying is that they're easing these restrictions because of the deployment of North Korean troops. So I wonder, how significantly do you think these North Korean troops will possibly impact this war?
I think they have the ability to impact this war significantly. We think there are 10 to 12,000 North Korean troops. We don't know how many the North Koreans plan to send. But as you know, if the North Koreans get involved in this fight heavily, then they've augmented the Russians and have the ability to support the Russians in this fight. They could tip the edge here. We just don't know. We have to wait and see what the North Koreans will be doing in supporting this fight.
And as you're talking about waiting and seeing there, the big wait and see is President-elect Donald Trump. He could undo some of these authorities Biden has authorized. What do you make of that, and what kind of impact could that have on the battlefield?
Well, it can have a lot if we reduce our U.S. funding. Keep in mind, the U.S. provides about 50% of the funding, and the other European and our partners make up the other 50%. That's a huge burden for our European and other partners to try and make up that difference, the U.S. 50%, as well as U.S. military equipment that's already on the ground, them trying to sustain that U.S. equipment and get U.S. repair parts. So it could have a significant impact on how the Ukrainians execute this war if we decide to pull out of it.
And how significant of an impact could the waning support among Republicans in Washington impact Zelensky's strategy on the battlefield, knowing that there may be a limit to how much weapons or aid or munitions he might receive, if any at all?
Yeah, then I think you're in a situation where diplomacy will have to be introduced into this war, and there will have to be some type of resolution, whether it be the Russians maintain the land that they currently have, or other some type of course of action. But I think you're limited at that point, and you have to get a diplomatic solution and bring an end to the war, whether it ends up being something akin to what is going on in Korea now with North Korea, South Korea, with a demilitarized zone, something of that, some type of frozen conflict. But I think that's where we would be headed at that point in time.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Lieutenant General Steph Twitty. We really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.